what are some of the vital components that go into planning a large-scale digital signage network? And why are those components crucial?
So the big key to getting ready for a large-scale deployment is getting a plan together in advance of going out, knowing what your purchasing and procurement schedule is going to be, having a firm understanding of your logistics, because a large-scale rollout is just that. It's going to cover a large geographic area, and you need to know all your logistics challenges that are going to come up across that area, and then making sure you have a good plan in place for your installation labor, and getting everything done once the items are on site. Having a plan in place in advance and not just kind of winging it is always a better idea. It sounds basic, but very few companies out there have a professional project management organization that can accomplish that in a very well thought out and scalable manner.
From a manufacturing perspective, it's important to have communication, feedback coming from a partner like Creative Realities, gathering information in the field, bringing it into their internal organization and sharing it out to a company like Legrand, so that we can plan accordingly to help meet the needs that the end user and CRI have, and make sure there's no surprises, as few headaches as possible. So that relationship, that communication is really critical. And something that CRI does a really good job at.
How about the importance of setting clear objectives and goals before beginning a digital signage project? What does that look like on either side? And then collaboratively speaking, what does that look like?
Yeah, a large part of getting that plan together is having a firm understanding of the scope, knowing what the customer's needs are, what we're actually trying to accomplish with the installation, provides a better understanding of how we need to deliver it. Customers may have logistics issues. They may not have an ability to receive materials, but their scope is to receive large quantities of large pieces of material. So it's good to have a firm understanding of the scope and how it pertains to meeting the customer's needs, because that's going to dictate some of your logistics.
The logistics portion, I mean, we touched on at the beginning, from the large scale planning plus the challenges that we're going to run into. It's also the same thing that Brian touches on. Logistics is near and dear to me. So one of the things that we have to do is we have to set clear-cut expectations internally with our internal customers, those project managers that we deal with, on what are the criteria that we need to think about when we deliver to a location. Like, what barriers to entry will we have? Is a large scale rollout where there may not be a concrete pad poured yet, so trucks cannot get to the construction site. Do we need to offload at a staging location and shuttle in? Do we need to work with the manufacturer and have staged deployments that go to various regions of the country, and then we draw from those? Do we have to set delivery appointments where it is a specific time that it must deliver, and those could be overnight that are outside of normal hours? All of this is, to Mike's point, it needs to be very clear in the scope of work that is defined with our customer and us, so that we can kind of make sure that we're getting all this captured on the front end. Because that's really kind of the bread and butter from the logistics portion.
Can you elaborate a bit on the importance of a strong manufacturer and integrator relationship? How does team alignment benefit the overall project?
From our side,
yeah, let's hear from
I was going to say, from our side, the relationship is crucial. It's very imperative that we have good partnerships. We are successful because of the trust and ability that our manufacturers put in us. This allows us the flexibility to scale up in need of production runs that we're going to be doing. They can help us stage product. They can help us find alternative solutions if something is constrained from an issue. There's many a time that I've had to reach out to Brian during rollouts and said, hey, we ran into an issue with XYZ part. This is an unforeseen circumstance that we ran into. What alternatives can we do to solve this for the next deployment that is tomorrow? And we will be able to look at alternatives and find solutions in a very timely manner. And that's something that you wouldn't just get from, a traditional brick and mortar reseller vendor type deal. This is crucial and tantamount to having a good partnership, and that they are invested in our success as much as we're invested in them.
Another big crucial item is having a long-term relationship with a vendor you can trust. It's very helpful for us if we know we're going to have a large scale rollout. These are not things that just kind of creep up on you and happen overnight. This is something that is hopefully months in the planning. And you're going to have reached out to your manufacturer and given them a forecast of items that you know are coming up so that they can start getting their own process aligned to deliver those products on the timeline that is going to be provided by the customer. So it's before, after. Having that relationship is great because there's always going to be issues that come up after, and that manufacturer is going to be leaned on to, help you solve problems that were unforeseen. Our partner here, Legrand Chief, has been there for us. Even Brian has done a good job.
Thanks, buddy. I would echo what those two guys said. When you have that relationship and that trust between the two organizations, and by that I mean multiple layers of relationships, myself with the team on this call, senior leadership, down to purchasing and everything in between, it removes a lot of barriers that rise all ships with that tide. And by that I mean, if I can make their life easier, they'll make my life easier. You attract more flies with honey than you do vinegar, right? If there's that trust in that relationship and we're mutually invested in each other and it benefits us equally, then there's a synchronization that happens between our two organizations to move the same direction and achieve the same goals. And that comes over years of working together and trial and error. But once you have that, it makes the whole process easier and, quite frankly, more enjoyable. And I think that's reflected to the end user in most situations as well. I think they can perceive that because the end result is better for them too.
Can we speak a bit about some of the common mistakes or oversights that might be made when planning a large scale digital signage deployment, whether it has to do with communication, which each of you touched on a bit, or other pragmatic kind of elements? What are some common mistakes you've seen?
The biggest is not understanding your logistics timelines. It's physically impossible to get pallets of goods from here to across the country next day without spending a fortune and probably blowing your entire logistics budget. It's firmly understanding and communicating timelines and schedules to your customers so that everybody has a firm understanding of there's a certain amount of time it takes to purchase, acquire, configure, and then ship product. A lot of people, they kind of run some things together and they maybe not account for that in their timeline so that purchasing somehow becomes right from the manufacturer to the site. And that's not always the case. So it's really understanding your timelines and then communicating, because you can understand them all day long, but if you haven't communicated it to anybody, it doesn't really serve a purpose.
That's managing expectations, right, Mike? It's you guys managing it to the customer. It's me managing it to you. It's you managing it to me. It's this triangle of expectations that have to be set based in reality. Even when it's a hard conversation, it has to be had, and just being okay with having those hard conversations. Because, like you said, Mike, reality is still reality, whether or not you sugarcoat it or not.
The other common mistake to add in that I've seen on some of our ones is just the sheer amount of product that can be delivered. There's things that will arise in various different situations that the customer may not be thinking of that, as an education piece, you learn from every deployment that you do on the things that you need to, follow up with them. So it'll be situations like, can you accept this large delivery? Or, hey, can you accept 26 pallets of stuff at a time? Can you receive them on this date or that date? Or is there a barrier to, delivering at an arena? Like we have one where if it's an arena, they may not be able to receive if they're doing a show or an event there that day. And so then it's coming into the equation of now I have to plan around your schedule of events as well, because it isn't then micromanaging the carrier's expectations. So I think that with logistics, to Mike's point and Brian's point, is there's a lot of feedback on all aspects, but there's also the micromanaging that we have to do sometimes, and course correction of just in time of this came up, this was unexpected. How do we go solve this today?
Can you discuss a bit the role of the end user at this point in the process, and how vital is their input? What's their access to, giving input and shifting the process? How does collaboration look at that point with the end user?
Yeah, as you start getting close to the end, it's very vital because you're going to go through a turnover process where you want to be able to provide them all the operational information they need to now use the product that you've delivered. Again, if you don't do a good job of communicating with them, it's all been for naught. So making sure that they have a firm understanding of sign off and closeout documentation. It's not just a matter of giving it to them, it's discussing it with them, making sure they know how to use it. That's going to really affect your day two support. Because it's always horrible when you've gone out, you've installed it, and the very next phone call you get is, okay, how do I use it? That's a failure on the deployment partner for not having gone through that and made sure that there is clear communication on how to operationalize what has been delivered.
Great. I think we can shift into engaging the target audience and the role of content planning. And when does the subject of content come up in the discussion? At what point does that critical piece start to become a directive in the whole process?
Almost day one in the process. Our content team, works hand in hand with our installation team. In fact, some of the noise you're hearing on this call is our director of content services who sits right next to me in our offices here. We bring them in day one because everything we are doing as an installation of a digital signage company is to display content. As the grandfather of digital signage, Mr. Alan Braun always says, content is king. Therefore, the whole point of what we're going out there to deliver is to deliver the content. So they're brought in day one.
How do you physically assess the environment? Who's best suited in each organization to do that site surveying? And then can you give some examples where overlooking that step led to unexpected challenges?
Yeah, there's nothing worse than installing a screen that nobody's going to see. And it happens a lot. You go into a lot of retail spaces, Beth's World, where you're installing these in retail spaces. And if there's no line of sight, it's pointless install. So that site survey is very mission critical. It's part of the quoting process a lot of times on a large scale rollout, which is an endeavor. So if I'm going out to a convenience store or a quick service restaurant, where the layout is almost guaranteed to be identical at every location, we're going to do a representative site survey. And we're also going to ask the customer if they know of any one-off situations, because we've all been in the McDonald's, for instance, that's in Times Square, and it's totally weird compared to every other McDonald's in the world. We're going to look for those one-offs, and those will be the ones we site survey. But in other cases, we have rollouts that are going to a business vertical, but not all controlled by the same ownership. A lot of franchisee operations where they're going into buildings that may not be similar. And that becomes a big endeavor. Then, the site survey is mission critical, and you have to go out to as many sites as you can to identify the possible issues you're going to run into. And then that's the only way you can develop a good installation plan. Because every installation is not going to be the same. And as I often say, ceiling installations, you never know what's going to be in the ceiling above a ceiling tile. Every building could be utterly different. So site surveys are mission critical, and they're part of the quoting process.
We can look at network and software requirements now. At what point and to what extent should software, specifically CMS, be considered? And then secondary question there is, how does the selection of CMS software impact the deployment process, and what should integrators be looking for in a CMS to meet their technical and content needs?
Well, you're asking a tough one since we're one of the largest CMS providers in the world. Some selling points from us is ease of use, stability across their platforms. It's going to be a very ineffective install if the first day they go to log in, the website crashes where they access their content. And then versatility across networks. So you brought up network connectivity. In many cases, the CMS provider or the integrator or both, if you happen to be like CRI and are both, we don't own that last mile. Most times we have to rely on the customer, and we have provided that customer a list of requirements, and they've said yes. You know, in those discussions and those discovery discussions, they've said, yep, we have all that, we'll be able to get there. And you get there and there's nothing of what you have. Back to the site survey, making sure we've quantified whatever the customer said. But ideally too, the CMS should be very robust in that it can use various methods. In our case, we can use cellular. Our system is designed to be robust. Cellular is not an always-on connection. So you have to have a CMS that can handle that intermittent connection that's presented by a wireless connection. And then you have to have a provider who has a good reputation for support. Customers are going to go out there thinking, oh, I just give you a picture and it appears on my TV, and they don't realize there's some complexity to setting up a storyboard or a playlist within their digital signage. And knowing that you have companies out there who have content services teams who are going to be able to provide you that day two support or that pre-installation support to make sure your content's ready to go day one. Wi-Fi is in essence a radio, and it's not very stable. You know, I've seen break room microwaves just totally bring down a Wi-Fi network, you know, intermittently throughout the day. So Wi-Fi is never a good idea. So yeah, understanding what your network capabilities are out there. Again, in regard to the CMS, in regard to the installation, if the nearest Wi-Fi antenna, something you're going to capture during site survey, is 150 feet away, yes, Wi-Fi is supposed to go 300 feet, but if there's 4 walls between the installation location where that antenna is, that distance has been reduced by 1/8 every time there's a wall in there. So all kinds of things to take into effect, and making sure, again, you communicate this with the customer to set expectations. It's very easy. A customer says, hey, I want this. Groovy. Yep, we can do it. We can do it all day long. That's not the most constructive way. I know it's a great way to make a sale. Not bashing on our sales folks. It's a great way to make a sale, but you're not setting the proper expectation. You know, and a lot of times too, there are things that in a large scale deployment, about a year ago, we deployed several LED walls to a large retail organization, about 400 of them. And some of it required construction. There's a LED wall. You got to go out. And there's construction involved, and I can't just go into a major shopping mall and do construction. I'm not a licensed GC in all 50 states. So you have to work a lot with the customers, and having a company that has that experience where, no, I'm not a licensed GC. Yes, I've been doing installation and construction work over the last 37 years. So having that level of experience in a team to know that we're going to have to interface and we've set the proper expectations with the customers. Ultimately, it's their building. We've got to have to lean on them and become partners with the site to figure out how we're going to get the installations done.
We've had situations where we've had to come up with unique networking solutions for theme park environments that we've done because they don't necessarily want to run cabling, which would be our preferred method because the cost is exponential to go trench and run power. But those bring challenges in that you're in a very RF dense environment. And so having our devices stay online is difficult at those times. So we've had to get creative in solutions for them. We've had to help coach IT personnel at customer locations on what's the best way to do this, give them recommendations on they may be sitting there saying, hey, they prefer to run everything as static IP. We have to give recommendations on what's going to be the easy deployment for them. And so to some extent, some of our people have had to be a little bit more versed in IT than normal, just to kind of get that information across to the customers at times. But these are all just random things that you're going to run into from a network environment because everybody thinks they know best when they're in IT. And I can say that wholeheartedly as I run our IT as well. But that is not always the case. There are things that we need to be mindful of because situations change, the technology is changing, and sometimes pieces just don't play well together. And those are all things that we have to be cognizant of as we work on solutions.
Looking at hardware considerations, what are the main considerations that go into selecting hardware, such as display and external media devices or other peripherals, and mounting systems for a large-scale digital signage project?
Reliability, reliability, reliability. Not only having product that you have experience with that's reliable, but having a manufacturer who is also reliable is a good partner. Day two support is the least profitable adventure a company can get into, because usually you're working on warranty, and so you're not making money by rolling a technician out to solve a problem. So you want to prevent the truck roll at all costs. And that's a very easy thing to do by just picking the right partners. There are screen manufacturers, display manufacturers out there that have failure rates as high as 4 or 5%. And in the grand scheme of the world, when we all go out of every 100 TVs we've ever bought, if only 5 of them ever fail, that sounds pretty good. But if you're rolling out 1,000 displays, and now 50 of them have failed and you've rolled 50 trucks to go fix those, that's a problem. So you need to go pick a screen manufacturer with a reputation of a low failure rate, player manufacturers with low failure rates. And if you really have to, you can use Chief, but you want to pick a good mounting solution. I kid. Chief Legrand has become one of the best partners we've ever had. They have been there for us when we need them, and they have a large selection of product, and it's reliable, well-engineered product. Because it's one thing, I won't mention it, there's another mount manufacturer, not Chief Legrand, who had the grand idea of making a behind-the-display media container that was hinged at the bottom. So when somebody had to go out and service the unit, the technician has to undo the screen, let it fall on them, hold it up, and try to work on the mount behind it. It's a great product. It holds on the wall. It does everything it needs to be done, but it's not well engineered. It's not serviceable after the fact. So having a partner who's thought through all these things, and to be honest, Legrand's engineers aren't out there installing it every day. So because of that, Legrand's engineers come to a company like Creative Reality once a quarter and say, hey, what are you seeing? What are the failures you're seeing? What are the issues you're seeing installing our product? And our feedback, I'm proud to say, over the last several years has created a lot of product improvement from Legrand. And in fact, it's allowed them to invent some product that hadn't been previously thought of. So, having those great partnerships and having companies with reliable reputations is paramount. Because there are cheaper screens out there. There really are. But if you're rolling trucks to cover your warranty, not so cheap anymore.
I mean, that's a pretty crucial piece. There's a lot of customers are going to look at it for the cheapest price point. They want to make sure that they're getting the best, the lowest price that they can get, without understanding that sometimes that trade-off of that additional $5 you save on per device means that you're going to roll more truckloads, you're going to have more failure rate, and it's going to cost you that much more over the life of the deployment instead of actually just spending the $5 up front. One of the big things that we have been trying to coach people on is get the right thing the first time. Make sure that we have replenishment stock there so that if there is failure, you have that same product, because it may not be available, at year 5 when you're in your life cycle. And so it just kind of helps to alleviate some of those issues that you have after it's been deployed, where it's just constant issue after constant issue because we went with the cheaper options.
Again, this comes back to the relationship and trusting each other. But from a manufacturing perspective, one of the things we try to do, aside from over-engineering and making an installer-themed and inspired product that's going to be easier for the folks in the field, is creating technology that allows a company like CRI to be more efficient in the field. And to CRI's credit, one of the technologies that they're looking into adopting is some power solutions that will allow them to monitor and control power devices in the field remotely, giving them a lot of post-installation capabilities to monitor, get ahead of issues before they come online, before they become reality, and create a better experience for their end users. So we as a manufacturer are trying to bring these products to market to get them to a Creative Realities, and Creative Realities is accepting them and is testing them to create a better experience for their customers as well. So again, it feeds back to that partnership of us as a manufacturer making product, relying on creative realities to guide us in terms of what the market is demanding and us responding to it. And then creative realities then taking that and turning and rolling it out into the marketplace and providing that great experience for their customers. So it's again, it's that trifecta.
We're going to go to implementation and beyond. So what are some of the most common pain points you've seen that occur during the installation phase, and how can those be avoided?
I think the biggest thing is having power and data surprises. You know, to the point earlier, we can't site survey everything. And especially if we're doing a rollout to something like a convenience store, a QSR, where we do expect everything to be the same. And then we get to the odd location that doesn't have either data or power as expected. Or if it's a situation where maybe the site survey wasn't as thorough, or the customer wanted us to move too fast, and the site survey was abbreviated or self-done, which is always a problem. It's finding out that, you know, there's not structure behind the wall to hang something. There's not power and data in place. There's not a clean sight line to the only available location to install. So a lot of it has to do with the things that are outside of our control around the customer's location and site that were just unforeseen things. So a good integrator, a good installation company that's going to go out is going to have risk plans in place to, if this can't be done as designed, have a plan B already in place. Menu boards, you're kind of limited on. There's only one counter. There's only one place to put menu boards. But sometimes we'll send folks out. Maybe the menu board being installed on the wall is not possible, and having a sight line, there's a soffit, whatever it may be, in place. If we have large scale rollouts, we'll usually have plan Bs logistically out in the market. So if a technician gets out and they're somewhere in the Midwest, they can't do the wall install that they were going to do, we have a ceiling install already staged in that market for them to go out to get the materials they need, come back the next day and complete the install. So always having a risk mitigation plan is going to be crucial, because the one thing outside of your control is the customer and their site. So really just having that plan B, not just in your mind or written down on paper, but you've actually done something to enact a plan B, and that it's ready to roll if something were to happen.
One of the other ones that you run into are just unforeseen logistics challenges from the customer themselves. That could be situations where they tighten a time frame on delivery to the location because they want to control delivery to their franchisees or their agents. It could be arbitrary requirements of imposed delivery window from delivery to tech on site that shorten, what we've been saying, these well planned out logistics plans, or the other unforeseen, which is unfortunately harder to plan for, which is the site just rejects the shipment or loses it. Those are all things that happen, that you do everything you can to help mitigate, to Mike's point. And a lot of it is just, you got to have extra stock. You've got to plan for things are going to get lost, things are going to get rejected by a site, and we've got to be able to move quickly to get something back out so that the installation group is able to keep going.
This is I'm just going to have a little fun with this one. Weather. 10 years ago, I used to always maintain a screen somewhere in the building that had the weather on it. And everybody thought I was a bit of a nerd. Why you got the weather up? How does that have anything to do with installations? In case everybody hasn't noticed, the world has gone mad. Weather is the most single unpredictable thing in our environment right now. You have snow just fell. I don't know if anybody saw that. Snow just fell in the Rocky Mountains this weekend. It's August and snow fell, and they had a crazy amount of wrecks. Part of an interstate was shut down. Having a group that's aware of the environment somewhere between our warehouse, our logistics center, and the installation is ground that has to be covered, and understanding that in your planning and communications, because the best laid plan may not account for the fact that a tornado came through and tore up an interstate. But knowing how to keep an eye out for that things, not being surprised, you should never have to wait for FedEx or a logistics carrier to tell you that. As a good planner and integrator, you're going to know that in advance. You're going to have communicated that to the customer and made sure that you've set the expectation. Hey, there's an unforeseeable delay. This is what we're doing to mitigate it. And your install will now take place on X date. And even though it's still not ideal, you've still missed the date, being able to mitigate that problem and communicate it to the customer in a timely manner instead of a reactive manner goes a long way for maintaining your customer relationship.
Let's talk a little bit about the most crucial steps for post-installation to help ensure the long-term success of a digital signage network. Maybe some obvious post-installation steps, and then maybe less obvious, kind of like what you just described, Mike, with keeping tabs on the weather being important for just a smooth process.
Yeah, the most obvious one is making sure you communicate a support chain of some kind, who to call, where to call, when to call, why to call. That can be as simple as a leave behind, or it can be as complex as a post-mortem meeting that you have with the customer to go over all that. In the case of franchisees, it's a bit more difficult because we're usually dealing with a corporate customer, and each franchisee is their own little king of their kingdom out there. So it's really important to try to communicate with the person responsible for the site, making sure you're not only talking probably to the franchisee, but to the store manager or regional manager. But really, it's finding who is ultimately going to be responsible on the customer side for determining support issues and who needs that communication. And then making sure you're very clear on the escalation path. If you're having a content issue, this is your escalation path. If you're having a hardware issue, this is your escalation path. And just being very clear about it. And then having a good client experience team. A team of folks who are going to make sure that they're customer representatives, and they're going to go out, reach out to those customers on a cadence to make sure everything's going wrong. Because sometimes screens fail, and maybe it's the signage that was there was not a mission critical sign. It was some kind of item that was just kind of reaffirming retail items to somebody within a store space, but it's not menus. It's not something mission critical to the business. You're going to find stores are going to ignore it. And if they've not signed up for some form of proactive monitoring, or maybe that just wasn't something as part of the installation, it could sit black. And as a digital signage provider, the last thing I ever want to see is a black screen anywhere out there in the world. That's a screen not making anybody money or not improving the business or customer experience in those locations. So making sure we have a client experience team that's reaching out saying, hey, we saw this is installed, 2 months ago, 90 days ago, 60 days ago, how's your experience? And getting that feedback, because that feedback from the customers is going to give us the best way of knowing what we did right and what we didn't do right. Where we exceeded their expectations and where we fell a little bit short. And that kind of feedback is always critical to constantly improving what you do.
Any key considerations for day 2 support and service? Like, when should that come up in the planning and execution process? And what will that look like in service level?
Ideally, it should come up in review of the scope when we're quoting that job. We want to make sure that we communicate in advance during the sales process the pitfalls. Because it's always going to be a negative experience if you sell somebody something. Hey, you just bought 10,000 screens. And after they've purchased it, you go, oh, and by the way, this can happen. This is a risk. You should really also buy this service. Yes, that's all accurate. Yes, that's all a fair thing to have said. It's bad timing and it's a bad optic to try to come back after the fact. Being very upfront and presenting everything gives you a lot of opportunities to discuss these issues. Maybe there are ways to mitigate it because it's a networking issue with the customer's network that the customer can mitigate it. But discussing those very early in the process during the original sales engagement, I think is crucial. That way we go out there delivering a turnkey product that day 2, they don't have to worry about it. If after we've installed it, something goes wrong, they're going to know that that's already been expressed to them, how that's going to be taken care of. And they don't have any worries. They don't have any anxiety post-install. So one big partner here who's the mystery partner in all this, there's really never going to be a face you put to them, is the distribution partner. Legrand sells directly to us, but many other manufacturers don't. They don't have that ability to sell. Some of the display manufacturers, lots of offices, lots of people selling displays, but those displays come directly from the overseas manufacturing site to distribution and then go out. So you also want to look for somebody who's got good distribution partnerships. There's a million of them out there. We've all heard of the big guys, the CDWs and all that of the world. But it's also a very fluid landscape. I come from the Tampa Bay area, the headquarters of Tech Data, one of the largest distributors in the world. And in the last 5 years, the whole landscape's changed. They've merged and changed things, and things have gone around. So also having good partners who keep up with the ever-changing landscape of distribution and getting those products from the manufacturer to the customer. Like I said, not all partners are the way that Legrand AV is set up, who can get it to us directly. So having somebody with the experience to go out and get those relationships with distributors, who's kind of that mystery middleman in the middle out there, that's also very important. Players. As we've just seen, players here today, gone tomorrow. There was a company that we had been using for years who this past February, after the earnings call from last year, just said, okay, yeah, we're not making any money, and they just shut it down. Spectacular, company. So even though they say they're going to support it, support's a little iffy. Just because they say it doesn't mean they will. So, trying to be as ahead of that in the market as you can be, knowing your products, knowing who's producing what out there. There's also some display manufacturers, very fluid market. There's also companies out there who are competitors, who are partnering with different companies and taking things on. So a display you're selling today might suddenly be the exclusive item that another company, a competitor, is going to start offering. So having choices too. A lot of businesses we've seen over the years make a partnership with that one key partner. Well, if that one key partner, for business reasons outside of your relationship, goes a different direction, now you're high and dry and you have a gap to fill. So having lots of great partnerships, having options. It never hurts to have options. Having options, having plan Bs, but knowing who your good partners are, and to your point, Beth, being transparent. Because if there's something you can get from a partner that maybe isn't the greatest, you want to make sure you're communicating that with those partners you do trust.
I know for me, from a forecasting perspective, it's essential that I have relationships with the purchasing team, and that we're meeting bi-weekly, sometimes weekly, sometimes daily if it's that hot of a project. Having that communication bridge and that openness to share, without it, the project is doomed to fail, because I can't know.
You can't forecast product.
Yeah, I can't know what's needed that I can't provide, and if I can't provide, then there's problems.
As I say, to Brian's point, I mean, it's really being able to step back and when you're looking at a large scale rollout compared to the individual installation is all about this one specific site and the one specific issues on this site. But the things that we have to look at when we step back for large rollouts is this a compounding issue? Is this something we're going to run into more? And we have to have people like Mike and I that can step back and look at the grand scheme of everything and go, do we need to course correct? The more data that can feed up through us so that we can step back and actually look at these large scale
Documented
fields of everything allows us to get the information over to Brian and sit there and say, in 90 days, I need a solution to this and you need to go. Because we're going to run into this problem. And it's allowed us to stay ahead of deployments as we need it, because you'll run into something on site one that may not be an issue for 90 days, right? But we've been able to fast track solutions. We've been able to find creative abilities to accomplish things. Like there was, I believe, a few years ago that Mike had an issue that the original scope solution wasn't going to work, and I was able to find a way to buy and deliver screens the same day from a distributor as a will call, which is something that's not normally possible when you're moving at enterprise speed. but we were able to keep the customer on track, keep the deployment on track, just because we went outside the norm. But we had good communication, and that's really what's imperative in this, is that there has to be good communication from the people on the front line. There has to be good communication to the vendors. There has to be good communication internally to the stakeholders, so that we can figure out, do we need to pivot, and do we need to have a new solution for this specific issue, or is this, a showstopper?
It's a lot of companies can easily fall into a silo. Hey, as the project management team, I throw it over the fence to the logistics team to ship it. And then I throw it over the fence for the install team. Here, we're very collaborative in our teams. As Chris has said, he and I are usually attached at the hip here in the company, getting things done, but also with the content team. There's a lot of, as we said earlier, content is king. It dictates some of how you install. So never one do we ever want to silo our knowledge base, and we do a lot of things here cross functionality. And it also gives us the ability that if any one part of our teams have failed at something through no fault of anyone's, it's just mistakes happen, or it just things outside of our control. There's other members of the team who can step in and help out and do what needs to get done. So we are very much so, it's not just, this is the guy who does the install, this is the guy who ships it. It's, hey, we're all in this together, and we're all going to make sure we make the right phone call to the right team member to get something done. So having an all-in team approach where every team is made up of everyone needed to get the job done, not just siloing it.